nice and slow walk. Got my 4 shots with caramel and a bit of half and half. It's about 90, 80 something. It's very nice. Very nice and very hot. Learn to embrace the heat. Not really. And also there's no humidity here really. So it's very pleasant. Wicks right off of you as soon as there's, wow, that's a dope dragonfly. That's a sign. Yeah, that's a sign. So somebody had left me an interesting comment, and there's something that really needs to be understood about the entire multi-gender and gender expression thing. This is, I really want to walk through it, so I could just kind of also go through my own memory about how I saw this develop almost from the very beginning. Being almost 50 years old, I was there. I was listening to KPFA. I've been on as a boy, as a teenager, I was on KPFA at some point, or KPF, I believe B is the other one that they was always around. It might be an entire other set of call numbers, but I thought it was KPFB. And these are kind of the most famously left public stations in American history. So I got to hear when people introduced this idea of there being some kind of quote-unquote spectrum to sexuality. There's not. There's absolutely nothing that shows some kind of spectrum of some sort. There's nothing genetically that shows this. And then even what really I kind of thought was fascinating was when somebody finally, presented, and there's a lot of conservatives that they just need to just break this down. Like, no, be quiet. You aren't a thing. And really, because they know what this means. Somebody would say, well, you Methodists aren't a thing. You just made yourselves up. See, that's the unfortunate part. And of course, with the Protestants, they're one of the more, they tend to be one of the more tolerant groups, and especially along this line of, you form a new branch, like one of the Manosphere Protestants once said. So the Protestants in the Manosphere was like, well, you just make a new branch. At some point, you're going to have to. And that's a very Northern European, Germanic, British kind of way of thinking about it, and of a specific vein that has become the Protestant people. Because of course all those places have Catholics, and those are like these kind of ultra traditionalists, that they find meaning in being kind of unified with the ancient unbroken tradition of ... Where these people are people who came as farmers, are extremely moderate and tolerant, and are like, will you please just leave me alone with all your strange ideas? I am going to take my seeds and I am going to make something great. I'm going to take my skills, I'm going to go out into the wilderness, I'm going to make something great. That's the German farmers, and so these various other groups of these kind of bright, sunny Protestants, and some are, people will be like, Protestants are kind of grim, but I mean, really, it's, in general, there's a way that they present themselves that's very positive. They're just a sunny group of people a lot of times. And they were the people who especially cautioned a lot of the Manosphere against the idea of siding with race. They were the Christ pill in the Manosphere against the alt-right, was really the hardcore Protestants. And that, I think that always is going to need to be kind of understood, is that the alt-right was defeated by Christianity to a great extent. Or it was, and my view of it, a lot of you probably saw this, is how I kind of thought it would end up, is almost like lodges, but it did. So it's that, and most people just don't know the story. It was the Christians who defeated the alt-right, and they don't know that, and that story might never be written. But those of us who were there, we were there. We saw it, and it was because it was this idea of like, what are you going to do? I'm going to take my seed and I'm going to have many children, like it was, and then now they're into Apollonianism and stuff like that. So, I've been wanting to address this idea that, so you see, the Christians on the right of center are going to get these people. This is always comes up in every kind of criticism of anybody just doing what most people want you to do. We didn't ask for this kind of stuff. We didn't ask for this. Who wanted this? When there is no who wanted this happening, who are these people who are like, who wanted this? Who wanted Raylo? Why did you guys do this? So the who wanted this crowd, they are not in any way, there's almost no history whatsoever of these people massively wiping out anyone. Really, from the 1900s and on, you get it, it's harder and harder and harder to get people of European descent to engage massively in warfare. It's more and more difficult as time goes on. So, and remember, here you can buy the Quran and the Tao Te Ching in the same building, and you could get multiple translations thereof. You could get intralinears of the 5 books of Moses, so that you can improve on your Hebrew. America is the country that does that. There's a lot of places in the world that's not going to happen. That kind of bookstore doesn't exist. There isn't also a culture of people who are like, yeah, I love this or that bookstore. That's literally a part of the culture of the Northwest, is bookstores and being into bookstores and having a bookstore large enough that you could sit and read a bit. And then, oh my gosh, they have a coffee kiosk now in the bookstore. And so, that's here. That's us. That's who Americans are. People want to think of it, no, you don't understand. That's my specific group of friends. Only we read books. And so there's this idea that, so there's none of these yahoos, all these yahoos, they don't understand. Though you can't really name in any definitive way why one of the many of these things called genders now are genders and are separate from another type of gender, other than, oh no, it's not hetero though. It's definitely not norm, because everybody's normal, really, about 89%. So that was the thing. Somebody got into this. They said, actually, do you know that if you were really to have not just the real psychosociological work, that you actually observe people, most people do what their sex does, to the point that it's only about 10% of the population at most ever really deviates heavily in some way that it's definitively, they only have sexual intercourse and intimacy with the same sex. That's actually at the, and then almost like any other kind of they pose as the other sex, things like that. You get, at the most, about 10% of the population. Not even that. I don't even think it's that. It usually comes up to something about 1% of the population, actually. If you really were to start taking people and spreading them out. This would be this extremely, extremely rare group of people that they end up in it appears in just population centers and kind of glom together in such a way that they look like they have like a large group of numbers, and they really don't. So this is one of the things is, in a place like Iran or Saudi Arabia or Oman, like, you all wouldn't be able to say shit. Here, you own land. Here, you have currency. You have access to banks. In fact, actually, here, you have multiple tiers of government. So local, state, federal, county that are trying to be like, boy, we sure need you running a department. We need you as a school teacher. Absolutely. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Do you even know what you're doing? We got a school. Do you know what you're doing? Okay, yeah, you can be a teacher. They're throwing the job at you. And it still is this thing of like, that you're trying to say that, like, oh, because DeSantis is enforcing legislation that's his job, is to enforce the legislation that all these representatives of the mass population have made sure to get passed. You're mad about that. You're mad about, really, democracy. And the beautiful part about it is you don't even really have democracy. This isn't the mob decided and now you face the mob. No, you face this person who's then this executor of law who makes sure this is done in a way that is preserves your rights. And now that, negative rights. There's this pretense going on by all aggrieved activists and bullshitters that they have that their negative rights are in some way being horribly beset upon. They never can defend this contention. Here's directly where this right is being violated, very clearly. They can't make this example stick. It never stands up against under scrutiny. One of the most important ones is now that more and more people are getting, no, but there's nothing about almost any kind of GenderSexual group that has some kind of law against their like sort of existence or their ability to own property or their ability to hold a job or their ability to vote, or because they can't even be described as a group in very accurately. They can't describe themselves as a group accurately and consistently. And so then the spectrum thing, which it just never existed. This has never been established. Nobody's ever been able to put some terminology to it with that it's rational. It's, that you could, under scrutiny, let's see if this holds up. And no, it never does. Because there is no quote-unquote spectrum there. It's just not there. And because really it was the hardness of dealing with the HBD people in the early days of the new right. Because these were people who were like, no, I think I know what you're talking about. You're talking about this, and they would get to a genetic difference. Behavioral studies the whole thing that was really frightening about HBD and all those people is how well they could cite their sources and how they were so good about really stating this is the limits of the knowledge we have, but it would follow that and that would be the horrible ramifications. Now, a lot of these people weren't really saying it in a way like ha ha ha, mwah ha ha ha, oh, when we get them, we're going to bend the lampposts or something. That no, they were really just pointing out, now this is what is what we know so far. People might theorize this might, scare people, and this is what we know so far. And so some people had to really delve into this, and they end up getting banned off YouTube, that they really mapped out that no, teleologically, you have heterosexual reproduction, period. Everything else from there is something that is, people can do it. It can be done. It is not some kind of different category of human, though. We don't have that in any way of categorizing life forms. Oh, the one that does this for pleasure and it has no bearing on sort of their reproductive method, because it doesn't have anything to do with the fundamental life processes. It's not really a thing in some ways of thinking of science. When it comes to sociology or philosophy or something, then you get into this realm of where we're really at. The Judith Butler talk. The endless, where she goes wading into the waters of some kind of French guy and just starts speaking in French to everybody, to the crowd. And they all start laughing warmly at her quoting some French guy. And so in my mind, I'm always kind of seeing sort of this, this idea of some berobed, old priestess, spinning in madness, chanting in French as all these people, all these Canadian students, dream of having boys' dicks lopped off. So a lot of what she's really getting into is the thing about how you just got a lot of tomboys, on the left. You got a lot of people who are, kind of weird chicks on the left. They are less desirable. They end up having, they just are, we could calculate what AIs know what is beautiful by human standards, and it falls in every race. There's certain proportions, even all the way down to the way your ears come out from your head, the way that where the points of your jaw are, all these different things. And we know this. And all artists know this. This is why the whole thing of uglifying art is really this way of kind of trying to pervert the science of it, and you get it. You're like, oh, like Jimi Hendrix twisted the various, chords of the Star Spangled Banner, and it's like, but this would be more like if he just took a shit on the stage, and, that over and over again. It's just disappointing. You're like, that's just vulgar and disappointing, and it's because then people could say, oh, I experimented and took it too close to the sun, and people just couldn't understand my art. It's like, or that this is something that really an AI is going to do better than you, and not too long from now. Which is that's one of the horrible things that I'm thinking, the horrible ramifications that's coming down the way, when people a lot of various types of artists are just replaced by AI, and creative types are replaced by AI. But the ramifications of a lot of the stuff that came up around the HBD thing, that really this was fueling the alternative right. And that's why I started getting involved, where I started pointing out various things about these various groups, they're extremely different than one another, or they get lumped together but they're not the same, or this idea and these forms of martial arts came in from this region into this region. So really, people associating this kind of thing with this group is not correct. And there's this, or Americans do this thing because of a certain wave of immigration, and we wouldn't have it another way. We simply wouldn't enjoy our lives if we didn't have this kind of part of the culture that was introduced, and really introduced is such that there were many people who were angry that they were introduced to our culture, and namely Catholics, like Irish and Italians and such like. And so that was my big thing, is I was just like, no. There's America's really awesome because, oddly enough, we do what we do very well, and we have our high points and our low points, and it's just that if you want to influence the culture for the good, you just have to look back in history enough to know how to create the kind of movement or cultural wave, really, that you want. So to a great extent, then I thought about because Eric Hoffer in The True Believer. And sure enough, the alternative right attempted things to become a mass movement, and they failed. They failed at becoming a mass movement. And for reasons that are 48 Laws of Power outlines and Eric Hoffer's things about mass movements also proffer that we actually end up seeing, okay, you guys did these things. These things are what ruined your potential mass movement. And, kind of seeing some similar things with AF, but also not. He's starting to, a lot of people don't get what you're trying to do is to create a kind of a cultural wave. A mass movement is not really good, because when you have a mass movement, you have to maintain it. And that's the whole thing. So like, punk rock was not a mass movement. You could hear songs, especially songs from Cocksparrer, that they talk about how there's people trying to make it a mass movement. Jello Biafra has some lines that say that there was a period of time that there were people trying to make the punk rockers into a mass movement, but instead, it was a cultural wave. It was a part of the culture itself. And so now, the thing with the GenderSexuals is that it is starting to show signs of becoming a type of quasi-criminal associated mass movement, because it's associated with the criminal dissemination of various types of pharmaceuticals, the obtaining of them, advocating for people who are not allowed to have them and use them, providing information thereof. And then there's the issue of that they aren't dealing with the underlying, maybe you need a lot of psychotherapy, period. What you really need is psychotherapy, and that's that. I mean, you're probably going to always need it, possibly. And there's not really going to be a way around this one. Everyone's kind of foreseeing this, is they're not really going to have a way around the need for a lot of people to have psychotherapy but it won't be there. So a lot of people are going to go just totally bonkers, and the West Coast is going to have a really hard time of it. But because there's no real metrics, there's no definitive terms, orange level, red level, like if you have burns are sometimes difficult to ascertain the difference between degrees of burn, and there's ways of ascertaining the degrees of the burn. And so that's why this is not really a field of science like we would think of as how many moles are in a pound of sodium hydroxide or something like that. It really is. No, this is a kind of art form. This is a form of almost kind of like a practical magic that makes people feel really good about themselves as long as they chant its ideas. And really, I think it's because a lot of this comes down to, there's these people that have fundamentally a variety of sexual fetishes that they can't really deal with, and it's because they're not really that attractive, and that a lot of times high level attractive mates are not fetishists in the same way. And there's a desperate need for a lot of people to believe, like Trump is a super fetishist kind of guy. Remember, this is where their minds always go. Their minds always go to, oh, this person's a dirty fetishist who does all these dirty things and they want to hide it. And really, there's this part of me that finally I was like, I kind of think this is the legit projection of fantasy. That it's like, that they kind of wish that was true, and they kind of wish they had that kind of money and that they could engage in something like that, or that because there's something really odd there about, they think everybody's that way when, it's like, could it possibly be that a lot of people are rather milquetoast in that way, in that realm? I mean, really? No. Like, I don't know. It's, I just think that's very interesting. That comes up so much, especially left of center with kind of odd-looking people, and that's just this exceedingly this big focus, big focus is various fetishes and how that has to be. It's a secret that all the people on the right are hiding the secret, and it's not that they're actually kind of way more boring. I think that also that's scary, is the idea of these people who are exceedingly boring, well-read, really are that disciplined, and that there's these people who are like, why aren't they freaking out? Why aren't they freaked out freaks? Why aren't they, having trouble dealing with reality? And I think that it really bothers them, that it's like, how do they win when they're not freaks? And they're not into the attraction of negative attention. And which, that's, I think, its own issue, that my generation was raised with. But, all right, I'll talk to you all later.